if you could wave a magic wand so they could perform better, they'd say wave it. But we know nutrition is so important, and I'm delighted that we've got two experts in the field of sports nutrition here, and I'm going to introduce you to one of them. But before I introduce you to one of them, I'm going to just tell you about the other one, which the one I'm going to introduce you to is going to introduce. That doesn't make any sense. We have the amazing Dr. Rakowski. Now, Dr. Rakowski is one of the best nutritionists in the world. I used to be a personal trainer. I was a personal trainer in 1989, and I was very, very serious about what I did. I loved what I did, and I was always interested in bettering myself. And at that time, there were two gods in the fitness industry. One was called Paul Chek, and the other one was called Charles Poliquin. And I remember going to both of their lectures and hearing them talk about Dr. Rakowski. And that name obviously imprinted in my brain because they would mention him quite often whenever they were talking about nutrition, and specifically about nutrition for athletes. And I came across Dr. Bob through very unforeseen circumstances. 9 years ago, my wife was diagnosed with a very aggressive brain tumor. She wasn't given very long to live. And we went to America. And to cut a long story short, she'd had cancer before. And I wanted her to see a nutritionist. And I think sometimes in life, you should be careful what you wish for, because with the next day, we were in Dr. Bob's office. I didn't know that at that time that was Dr. Rakowski, who Paul Chek and Charles Poliquin mentioned. But when I saw all of the pictures in his office of the athletes he'd worked with, I immediately realized, hang on, maybe that is Dr. Bob. And it was, and my wife is now cancer-free, and we have become very good friends, and Dr. Bob introduced me to some products that contain an incredibly amazing superfood that he told my wife to take. My wife changed her diet. My wife took many of the supplements that Dr. Bob recommended, specifically this superfood that we're going to talk a little bit about this evening. And a year and a half later, Dr. Bob contacted me and asked me if I wanted to join him in one arm of his businesses, which you'll also hear about this evening. And a few years later, I met Paul. Paul is an incredible nutritionist and works with some great boxers, and works with some great other athletes as well. And we'll hear from him in a minute. But when I told him about some of the products that we had, he became very interested in them, and he also started to get his athletes to consume it, because he wants his athletes to perform at their absolute best. So I'm delighted that I get to introduce Paul O'Neill, sports nutritionist. Paul, take it away. Thank you so much for being here this evening, and over to you, my friend.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pete. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah. Just picking up on what Pete said there, I'm a sports nutritionist, work with some fantastic fighters at the minute that are really putting it out there. The titles have started to come in. And each one of those fighters is all about, generally fighters come to me because they are looking to make weight the correct way, whilst improving training output and ultimately improving performance. And before I hand over to Dr. Bob, because Dr. Bob has done this with athletes across the spectrum of all sports. But some of the things that we're looking at when fighters come to me is, we're trying to build that improved performance, improved training output, and ultimately for fighters or for my boxers is to win titles. And 3 quick points on that is that, number one, we're trying to set at the start of training camp, we're trying to set a solid foundation built on health. The health side of things makes athletes, it gives you that base to then go on and improve training output, improve performance. And it's that solid base on health is what allows you to do all of those things whilst athletes drop, some athletes drop a considerable amount of weight throughout their fight camp. But that solid health base gives you that opportunity to do that with them. And then I suppose the holy grail for any athlete really is things like we're looking to improve oxygen supply to the working muscles. and we're looking to build a stronger lactate buffering within the body. Those two things, all athletes are striving for those. You know, every athlete wants to be able to supply their muscles with as much oxygen as possible. And of course, they're all looking to buffer that lactate that builds up during you know, intense workout. And what I've found is, you know, when I first met Pete a few years back, some of the products that Dr. Bob's going to talk about is just something as simple as, you know, choosing the right brand of tea and coffee, you know, really helps me in supplying my athletes with those, you know, those 3 points that I've just spoke about there. But like I say, Dr. Bob has done this with many athletes. So I'm delighted to hand over to Dr. Bob and let him take away and explain some of the products and you know, dig a little bit more into the science behind what they do.
Well, thank you a bunch, Paul and Pete. Absolutely beautiful day here in Houston, Texas. But one of my mentors once said this. He says, look, everybody's an athlete. And later on, in fact, not too much in the too distant future in terms of slides, I'm going to show one that shows that the same factors that help super elite athletes take their game to the next level are the same strategies that actually help the critically ill survive. So keep in mind, when you enhance your body, when you enhance your brain, you enhance your immune system and its ability to defend you. So I was lecturing at a sports conference years ago, and this was the primary article that I shared, and anybody can look up whenever you see a PubMed ID. If you just type in those exact characters and numbers into your Google search, it can take you right to the article. But the article was entitled Performance Enhancing Sports Care Supplements, right? Their role in critical care. So very quickly, they realized that if you could help an athlete improve its focus, if you could help the athlete improve their fuel, their acid alkaline buffers, their inflammatory control, and enhance their recovery, these were the same things that the critically ill needed. Later on, we'll talk about why we're so excited about our delivery system. You know, all the athletes that have put on huge protocols, and sometimes we had to change their chemistry very significantly. I have a picture later on of a guy named Tyson Gay. 2 weeks after I treated him, he beat a guy named Usain Bolt straight up in the 100-meter race. And interestingly enough, all the athletes that we put on protocols to change their chemistry, as soon as their event was over, basically they started backing off on the supplements that they were taking. But now we literally have supplements that are automatic. By blending things in coffee and tea, people consume them every day, multiple times a day, and they absolutely never need to be reminded. And that's what makes what we have to offer so powerful. So we're going to start with focus. A fun quote from Yogi Berra. He said, baseball's 90% mental, the other half is physical. Well, you know, the math isn't very good, but he's right on in terms of the mental game. So literally every single high-level athlete that I've talked to, I said, how much of the game is mental? The answers I got, probably the lowest level, someone said 80% mental. And I've actually had a few athletes tell me the game is 100% mental. One of my NFL defensive backs, I looked at him, I said, come on, it can't be 100% mental. You've got to have the physical skills. And he looked at me and said, Bob, in this league, everybody's got the skills. It's the mental game that determines who plays, who starts and who doesn't, and who stays in the league and who doesn't. You've got to keep that mind sharp. So I tell people the brain is the most nutrient dependent, energy dependent, stress vulnerable, and toxin vulnerable organ in our bodies. And therefore, if we can enhance the nutrition, improve the energy, clear out the toxins, and buffer the stress, we're going to get ourselves an edge up on the mental game. So a series of PubMeds. Later on, people can take screenshots of this. We'll play a review later. But what you'll find out is the herb that we have in our coffee and tea, by the way, we also have shakes, Ganoderma lucidum, is proven to enhance serotonin. Now that's the chemistry of happy. GABA, that's the brain chemistry of calm. Acetylcholine, that is the chemistry of memory. And dopamine depends on what part of the brain. It could actually be focus, it could be extreme joy, or it could even be fine motor control. but there are studies across the board that shows that Ganoderma is good for focus, it's good for circulation, it has the nutrients, and it even helps to clear the toxins. So here's a fun athlete that Pete Cohen introduced to the coffee, and literally within one cup, he noticed a difference in his ability to perform in the gym and how he recovered. Next, we'll look at fuel. You know, Hippocrates said over 2,000 years ago, let your food be your medicine. Another one of his contemporaries, Lucretius, said one man's food's another man's poison. I actually say today, most men's food is a poison for all humanity. Michael Pollan, he wrote a book called In Defense of Food. He's got a very famous quote. He says, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Now, I'm going to expand on that. I tell people eat real food, not too much, not too often, every color, every day, in a way that honors your genetics, your physiology, and your health goals. So if we were to go to a, you know, extreme power athlete like Mark Henry or maybe even Michael Bennett and say, you know, listen, you've got to eat a mostly plant-based diet, they'll tell you when I'm in training, I'm going to waste away if I try to do that. So these are athletes that are certainly going to need higher levels of animal protein. And if we buffer everything right in their system, we can get their body performing beautifully on a diet that helps them to reach their goals. This was a study in the journal Advances in Therapy, and they literally took age-matched, health-matched individuals, and they went into their cells and they examined the nutrient level within the tissue itself. And what they found out very simply after taking two groups of people, one group got a great diet, about as good a diet as they knew available, and another got great diet and supplementation. They found out at 90 days, only those that had supplementation actually improved their nutrition status. So the conclusion from the article, food is too weak to replete depleted cells and bodies. Therefore, supplementation is advisable for everybody. So when I teach sports nutrition, when I talk to my athletes, we want to start with a good baseline diet. Then we add superfoods. Medical foods are foods that are formulated to have a specific effect on the body with guaranteed potency, guaranteed purity, proven effectiveness in human clinical trial, and every nutrient recognized as safe. We buffer with a multivitamin, multimineral, activating omega-3 fatty acids, probiotics, and a D3K2 combination. Now, when you look around the world and you try to understand why anybody makes a food choice, the number one reason is it's got to taste good. So number two reason is they actually want it to be convenient. Number three, it needs to be within their budget, cost effective. And the fourth is actually, you know, is it actually good for me? So years ago, you know, I put Evander Holyfield on a protocol, and part of what I was using at the time, and I still use them, were herbs that tasted really, really bad. I mean, they just tasted like dirt. And I would have him take these things every waking hour. You know, and he looked at me, he says, you know, I can handle just about anything for a short period of time. And he did. Whatever protocol I put him on, he was really, really consistent and calm with it. But then my kids taught me an interesting lesson. So this picture goes back nearly 20 years ago. Jacob's a dad now. Christy's a mom. Actually, her baby is due in August, but we'll call her a mom already. You know, Lexi's graduated from Texas State with a degree in psychology. But I wanted my kids to eat really, really healthy. And I would try to put together medical food shakes for them that didn't have good texture and didn't have good taste. And you know what? They'd take one sip and they'd spit it out. So I came to realize that, okay, I've got to make this taste good, feel good, be good. So my son and I would be in front of the blender and we'd put in nut butters to make the texture right. And we'd put in blueberries to give it a fun color. And then we'd put in honey to make it taste just right. And then, you know, with a lot of trial and error, we finally got something that they would actually want. They would enjoy it. They'd ask for it every single day. Well, the company Organo that we're going to talk about later has shakes that literally taste like liquid birthday cake, where we've had people lose over 100 pounds on a shake that they crave. We have a hot chocolate that every single kid that I've ever seen falls in love with, and it's good for his body, mind, and spirit. Over time, I found out that most adults are really just big kids. So ultimately, we want to give them something that they look forward to every single day. When it comes to acid-alkaline buffers, The book on the left is probably 30 years old. It was a really powerful book when I read it, but it basically was entitled Alkalize or Die. Every single process that we have in our body that makes energy, one way or the other, is going to make acid as a byproduct or a waste product. So all of our elimination routes get rid of acid. Rather than focus on alkalize or die, I like to focus on alkalize and thrive. Here's a peer-reviewed medical study that basically says that we need today a nutrition intervention in order to create the right pH balance within the body. This is a medical study from 2016 that showed that alkaline diet did a lot of things, including improving bone density and muscle mass. That's something that's going to be really powerful for all of our athletes. But here's where most of the chemistry is going to be impacted by the right acid-alkaline balance. Literally every hormone and enzyme in our body is going to function optimally at the ideal body pH. And once you get beyond a certain level, your enzymes and your hormones decline dramatically. So, I can tell you that now 28 years in clinical practice, I've had patients come in and they've got lots of lab work and they have every sign of low thyroid, but yet you test their thyroid and their numbers are perfectly fine. What easily can be happening is that they don't have the right acid-alkaline balance and the hormone they have is very ineffective. Very easy to understand that with thyroid, but understand that there's a lot of guys out there walking around with very low levels of testosterone. And then you couple that with a pH that's not right, and then you get the worst of the worst circumstance. Quote from the medical literature, if the acid-alkaline isn't right, it may take twice as much of the same hormone to create the same response from the tissue. So even if an individual has great testosterone, if their acid-alkaline isn't right, they may only be getting about half of the benefit. So this is a graph of an Olympic sprinter. We can see that, at 60 meters, as they start kicking in anaerobic glycolysis, burning sugar in the absence of oxygen, they create lactic acid, and lactic acid causes a speed drop. So I have this on my Facebook page, and I'll probably throw it on my YouTube channel as well. Mike Tyson Gay, actually, I almost said Mike Tyson. That's funny. I definitely like Mike Tyson, never treated him though. But Tyson Gay came into my office. We did a workup on him, and we balanced his chemistry. He really had a significant issue with acid-alkaline balance. 2 weeks later, there's a picture from the race. He beat Usain Bolt straight up in the 100 meters. Before his sweat had even dried, he signed a $1 million endorsement. Part of that protocol was this herb, Ganoderma, the king of herbs, which is considered by many to be the most alkaline fuel on the planet. Finally, we're going to move to inflammatory control. Time magazine cover years ago, they called inflammation the silent killer. In terms of athletes, most athletes have heard of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide was Nobel Prize winning research. They quite simply found that the body makes a molecule, nitric oxide, that can dilate blood vessels by up to 62% in a single dose. So when your body is inflamed, however, inflammation just devours nitric oxide. In fact, some studies show by as much as 1000x. So since I'm a visual guy, that's a picture of a python swallowing a sheep. Inflammation will definitely devour nitric oxide. And for those of you that like PubMed, Ganoderma is a very powerful regulator of nitric oxide directly and indirectly. By modulating the inflammatory process by more than 13 different mechanisms, we spare nitric oxide. And because it's a high nitrate plant, there's more nitrate that can ultimately become nitrite and nitric oxide within the body. Finally, we'll move on to recovery. I talk about the Magnificent Seven. Pete did a podcast with me. By the way, Pete Cohen, one of the top 10 podcasts in all of the UK. His very first podcast was with me on the topic of the Magnificent Seven. I tell people you've got to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right every single night. One of my mentors once told me, you know what, I don't know how much sleep you need, but I know that your body knows. So if you wake up every single morning refreshed and ready to go after the day without an alarm, hey, that's probably the right amount of sleep for you. Anders Ericsson is considered the world authority on peak performance. And when he looked at high performers across all fields, it didn't matter if it was a circus performer, a chess master, a musician, an endurance athlete, a strength athlete, the best of the best slept an average of 8.6 hours every single night. And the medical literature says this: nothing can replace poor sleep. You can't make up for it with diet. You can't make up for it with exercise. And in fact, other studies show that when you sleep poor, you're more likely to have bad food cravings. You have less energy to exercise, then you're more inflamed and you don't recover as well. So our herb, Ganoderma, medical studies show that when people consume it, they fall asleep faster, they sleep deeper longer, and they wake up more refreshed. So we have what we need for focus, fuel, acid alkaline control, inflammatory control, and recovery. And this is a topic that we have shared around the world. This was one that we did with some other fitness professionals. I was a World Wrestling Entertainment chiropractor, at least for local events, for 3 years. Chris Masters, a current phenomenal wrestler, literally had an injury and felt an immediate difference by consuming Ganoderma. Eric and Heloisa Higgins on here, awesome people, awesome trainers. They've shared the benefits, as has Brendan Coates with this. Now, Paul Stamets is considered a world authority on mushrooms. In fact, he has a TED Talk entitled 6 Ways That Mushrooms Will Save the World. And once he gave that talk, 9/11 came around, and basically the US Department of Defense said, hey, could these mushrooms be good against some of these horrible things like smallpox? And so literally he cultured thousands of species of mushrooms, and he found out that yes, mushrooms create some of the greatest immune defense anybody will ever see. In his TED Talk entitled 6 Ways Mushrooms Will Save the World, he talked that they clean up the environment. They're actually insecticides, antiviral, antibacterial. They create healthy soil. They're great for human nutrition, but somehow he missed wealth. And by the way, the world mushroom market is approaching $50 billion. Paul Stamets, in this recent pandemic with COVID SARS-2, his website is completely sold out. People know that these mushrooms can help them get the edge on health, so they reached out to him and they bought all that they could. US market for Ganoderma, $2.5 billion a year. Top trend for Ganoderma is putting it in foods and beverages. And here's where we shine. We actually have USDA certified organic Ganoderma that we have available in capsules. We have it in coffee. We have it in tea. We have it in shakes. And we have the highest quality control in any nutrition line that I have come across in now nearly 30 years of being a clinical nutritionist. So the world knows how good this is, and your body will know how good it is when you actually put it to the test. So with that said, I'm going to see if anybody wants to ask any questions. I'll look at the chat first. You may be able to raise your hand. I may be able to unmute you if you like.
Can you hear me, Robert? It's Pete here.
Yes, sir. Happy, beautiful day, my co-anetic friend.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure to hear you speak. I mean, I've heard you speak for days to, nutritionists and doctors are always so fascinated by what you say. And that's a nice mug you've got there. Anyway, I just want to thank everyone for being here. And, the world is definitely changing. And we need to look outside the box for solutions. And you can do your research on Ganoderma. We have so much of it that we're more than happy to share with you. But what Dr. Bob has explained is something that is available to everybody, as too is the opportunity, because it's a business. And someone sent me a message today about the coffee market, just how big it is. And I think one thing that's so fascinating is if any of you are looking for a business or you know someone who is, I think the most important thing is with any business is that you have something that people want, as opposed to something that people need, because people don't tend to do what they need to do. they do what they want. And coffee and tea is what people want. And what the company Organo has done is put this incredibly powerful superfood into something that people do every single day. And what I've seen this do for athletes is unbelievable. You just couldn't make it up. If I told you, you might think, is that really true? Well, the proof is in the pudding, right? And then Paul, again, as questions come in, Paul, I'm just curious as to what sort of things have you noticed from athletes that have been consuming? I know you get them on our green tea as well, that's got Ganoderma and the coffee. What sort of things have you noticed?
Yeah, so I mean, any athletes that work with me know that the coffee and the green tea is a staple throughout the whole camp. It's in their programs daily. And with me, anyone that works with me, or even if they follow me on social media, they know that I take a completely informed approach. So I do lots of testing. I do some DNA testing, some VO2 max testing, and I'm not kind of just sitting here saying to you this will improve. You know, I'm not picking numbers from the sky. I've got the numbers in black and white. The athletes that regularly drink the green tea throughout camp, you know, I've got the numbers there through all of the test data that shows the improvements are tenfold. You know, these guys are improving throughout camp.
You know, one thing we didn't mention is I was with Manny Pacquiao in Dubai. And Dr. Bob, if you could show that picture. I mean, many people think I think he's definitely one of the greatest of all time, you know, having won multiple world titles at different weights. And he is a massive consumer of Ganoderma. And what's interesting about him is he joined the business. He loved the product, but one of the reasons he joined the business is he's got a massive entourage of people, and he knows that a lot of those people, when he stops, they're not going to have anything to do. So he wanted to give them something they could do. And he's a truly remarkable man. In fact, if you Google him and Organo, you can hear him talking about why he consumes it. So look, there's a great opportunity here for you. I don't know whether there are any questions, but if any of you want to know anything more about this, whether it's just consuming a product or whether you want to know more about the business, I know Dr. Bob is speaking at a really big event tonight in half an hour. I mean, a major event with probably thousands of people from all over the world, with people like Les Brown and who else is presenting?
Tony Robbins, Harvey McKay, Eric Worre. Phenomenal group.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Are there any questions that you can see there from anyone? In fact, one more thing. Sorry, we do have a business presentation tomorrow, which Mr. Eric Higgins will be doing, and that's at 7:30 here in the UK. So in 24 hours time. So if any of you want to come and listen to that, that's concentrating a little bit more on the actual business side of this. You know, coffee's not going out of fashion, right? It's one thing that people will not stop doing in times of economic crisis. Coffee consumption goes up. And health, there are more people now that are looking to improve their health. This is the event that Dr. Bob will be speaking at. If you want information on this, it's free. Again, just let us know. Any questions before we wrap this thing up? It's great. 50 people in the room as well, which is also amazing.
So Pete, if I don't see any questions coming through chat, so I'm going to finish with 4 questions. And these are from the book, As a Man Thinketh, from James Allen. And they're brilliant questions. So the first question is why? Why did you take the time to, you know, be with us here this evening or this afternoon, depending on where you are in the world? His second question is the answer to the first. Why not? Why not look at things that are proven to help people, not just in, you know, 1 study, 2 studies, but in thousands of studies over 5,000 years of human history. I really like Paul's approach because it mimics my approach. You know, my athletes, when we look at them, we find out where their weakness is, and we not only show them that we make them better in the lab, but what keeps them coming back and bringing in multiple generations, right? When Evander Holyfield brought in Evan Holyfield, they basically said, look, we want you to do for Evan what you did for me. And with him, it's, you know, he estimates we extended his professional career by 10 years, a decade. And that's a lot of money, right? So it not only works in the lab, it works in the patient, it works in the competitive field, whether that's the ring, the cage, the soccer field, the football field, the baseball diamond, the basketball court, you name it, it works. It's been shown to do it. There's a business here, and what we're finding out now, the US now has 10 million people unemployed. Companies here literally fired people so they didn't have to pay them any benefits. Just one day they had a job, the next day they were fired, and that happened to millions. So what if you actually started sharing a healthy coffee, partnered with people like Paul and Pete and Eric Higgins and myself, and built something that could help the world? Third question is, why not you? Someone's going to say, this makes sense. I'm going to get back to whoever sent me to this Zoom, and I'm going to start putting it in my body, and I'm going to start sharing it with the world. And then the final question is, why not now? So the reality is, the longer you wait to act on information, the least likely you are to act on it. Your action items are simple. Get back to whoever sent you here. Get some product from them. If you know you already want the business, talk to them about that, and join us in an hour now for this epic event. With that said, we'll sign off soon, but I'll finish with what I like to classically tell people. I'm Dr. Bob Rakowski, and I absolutely know that we can all be happy, healthy, and successful.
Thank you so much.